Sports Professor Rick Horrow inside the $1.3 trillion business of sports, and you are on the record. A unique podcast, at least I hope so, that talks about the past 50 years, COVID, and the next 50 years of the sports business, where it's been, what the challenges were, and where it's going. Every week, we will theme it around major events and a mega interview, and hopefully you'll be entertained and you might even learn something. Sports Professor Rick Horrow, and you're on the record. Sports Professor Rick Horrow inside the $1.3 trillion business of sports, and you are on the record. A turbulent time in college football. Miami and Alabama don't like the CFB. Other teams, SMU, Indiana, certainly do. And the beauty of it is everybody talking about this newfangled playoff system that will have its roots now, and in the next few weeks, we'll see the revenues start to generate, along with the 36 other bowls, more bowls than ever before in history. We'll talk about the opening drive and the 5 to watch like we normally do. But this week is pretty special. In April, I was lucky enough to host and MC the Maxwell Awards and use that as an opportunity at the Hall of Fame in Atlanta to have stakeholders of college sports sit down with me, emceeing a major panel discussion on the economics of the college game heading into the season. And boy, is it more relevant now than ever. Steve Hatchell, the head of the National Football Foundation, Roman Oben, the director of youth and high school football for the NFL since 2015, Bobby Hauck, the winningest coach in Montana and Big Sky Conference history, and involved in the University of Montana issues, as well as the National Coaches Association. Jay Batt, the Georgia Tech AD. He's a 10th AD at Georgia Tech, and his key hires were football coach Brent Key and basketball coach Damon Stoudemire, and obviously a successful organization. And Kevin Lennon, the senior vice president of the NCAA. Over 35 years in intercollegiate athletics, advising on policy and governance. These people are more than qualified to move forward on all of the issues college football. And let's see where it goes. A great panel and a great opening to this week's On the Record. Let me give you the Maxwell Awards College Football Panel on Stakeholders. Professor Rick Horrow, we're here at the 87th Annual Gala Awards, Maxwell Awards event, but this is not just that. We have an opportunity, a rare one, for thought leadership at a time of maximum turbulence, but maximum opportunity at all levels of college and high school football. And when you think about it, it's a time for deep reflection, creative thought, and some reasonable and significant solutions. You know, at the start of the 20th century, President Teddy Roosevelt threatened to abolish college football. The stats were serious, nearly 20 deaths and about 160 serious injuries during that year. Think of it, at colleges, they actually hired players not enrolled in schools to fill out their rosters. Imagine that. And some universities halted football on their own because they didn't know how to clean it up. Well, they had the best minds in the country, we understand that, representatives from Harvard, Princeton, and Yale, to try to figure out how to deal with the issue. And at the end of that was the creation of the Intercollegiate Athletic Association. New York University Chancellor Henry McCracken convened a group of 62 colleges. The result was the NCAA in 1906. But also in 1921, the new championships, first one in track and field. 1980 were women's championships, Title IX. And the business of college football continues to morph as well as high school football. According to our friends at the National Football Foundation, 81,000 college football players in the NCAA and NAIA, 15,000 high schools in the U.S. that sponsor football, about 1 million high school football players, 2,500 high schools sponsor girls tackle football, and who knows how many now girls flag, especially heading to the Olympics. The booming business of college football, NCAA report identifies about $16 billion in potential Division I revenue, and for the first time, 5 programs, we probably know who they are, Ohio State, Texas, Alabama, Michigan, Georgia, over $200 million. Maxwell Football Club, founded in 1935 to honor Robert Tiny Maxwell, known for his integrity and sportsmanship. And as the MFC celebrates nearly 90 years of outstanding leadership, the industry faces major challenges to navigate the unprecedented business of football. The challenges are daunting and unprecedented, but the industry continues to grow at a spectacular pace. The Spanish flu recovery of 100 years ago gives us a good model, and the Roaring '20s now are the next set of post-COVID recovery. Unprecedented creativity, sharing of best practices, unforeseen technological advances that are now the normal order of the day. And as we move forward, the best and the brightest minds, like those in this room and on this panel, continue to carry the day. College football is and will continue to be stronger than ever, and let the thought process begin. And in order to take us to that step, we have some of the best minds in the sport. Beginning at this side and going to the other way, we have Kevin Lennon, Senior Vice President of the NCAA, 35 years in intercollegiate athletics, advising on policy and governance, strategic advisor to the NCAA President, liaison to the Knight Commission, and last but certainly not least, a Harvard graduate. Steve Hatchell oversees an organization, National Football Foundation, 500,000 student athletes, nearly 20 years in the head of that organization, Atlanta College Hall of Fame, the leadership of the NFF, and a whole host of scholarship and academic disciplines, raising significant dollars for all. Roman Oben, National Football League VP of Football Development, and has been with the NFL since 2015. Born in Cameroon, moved to D.C. at 4 years old, 2002 Super Bowl champion with the Bucs, and Duke, Notre Dame, his son playing football, other son at Monmouth, but he's also leading with the NFL college outreach strategy and game development, high school as well, all-star game and the like. Certainly qualified for that and beyond. Bobby Hauck, University of Montana coach, the winningest coach in Montana and Big Sky Conference history. His teams excel academically, leading in academic, all Big Sky placement. Montana born and raised, Montana alum, a short trip at UNLV, but clearly back where he probably belongs. And Jay Batt, the AD at Georgia Tech, 10th AD at that school, key hire football head coach Brent Key, basketball coach Damon Stoudemire, secured a transformative partnership with Hyundai and others, previously at Alabama, enhancing revenue opportunities there. The panel, well equipped as representative stakeholders of all of these major issues. Start over here with Kevin. Completely by accident, we were going to change the order around, but as the NCAA Senior Vice President, you talk a little bit about yourself. I did a bit of that already, but tell us what you think is the major challenge facing college football in the years ahead.
Well, great. Thanks for having me here, and it's great to be with all my colleagues here. It's needless to say, this is an incredibly interesting time in college athletics. There's an awful lot of positives going on. I really appreciate you kind of sharing those and reminding us, because we have a tendency to focus on the negative. We're problem solvers, and there clearly are problems, but let's begin with the basis that our young people are having this incredibly transformative experience for them, for their families, the vibrancy it brings to the communities, both on campus and the broader community. There is just an awful lot of good things going on in college athletics and certainly in college football. If you ask me to name one particular issue, I think it's the potential that student athletes would become employees at our campuses. And we have a series of challenges right now that are going on in our courts. We have some recent rulings that I think would have, candidly, an incredibly adverse impact on the broad array of sport offerings that we offer for young people right now. And so if you ask me for that one particular issue, it would be that. I think that would be draconian in terms of the impact of broad opportunities across the board. And, you know, in that regard, we are going to need Congress to likely help us. It looks very likely that the courts have signaled some issues about employment, and the Congress is the only one for this audience to recognize that can address that particular issue. I hear a lot of people saying, why does the NCAA need to go to Congress? And I really want to lock this point in. Congress is the only entity that can deal with the fact if student athletes are determined to be employees. There's not one thing that we can do. There's not one thing the NCAA can do. Only Congress can help us. So we all have a part to play in making college athletics go well. We have courts that have said, I'm not worried about this particular issue. That's for somebody else to worry about. We have pundits who say this employment model may work for some and therefore we think it works for everyone is a great thing. It's time for all of us collectively to come together and say we have to care about this entire enterprise, not picking off individual issues that are important to each of us, but how do we come together for the broader community that is college sports. So I would share that.
Well, Kevin, just one quick follow-up on that as well. And this is taped at the awards event, and this will be spread throughout the year, including probably around draft time. And so the fact that the Dartmouth basketball team voted to unionize is an incredibly important issue this week, but it's also important for implications down the road as well. A lot of reaction about that. Will that itself, like Northwestern years ago, should it force treatment of this issue one way or another?
Well, we have two other issues besides the Dartmouth ruling here. There's a National Labor Relations Board hearing going on right now in California, and there's also the Johnson case that is going on. Both of those have at their crux student athletes being deemed to be employees, and based on some of the questioning and some of the early sense in light of the Dartmouth ruling, it's potential that this could have a bit of a ripple effect in that regard. So it's why I noted it as being probably the biggest challenge that we have, because I think that would be detrimental to the college athletic experience that you so accurately highlighted from 1906 has continued to provide great opportunities. We need to change, but that change should not be going to an employee status.
With our education initiatives, we're coming up with the concept that we want you to go to college over a 4 or 5 year span of time. You're going to build a house in 4 years that you're going to live in for 40 years. And when you look at our board, and Archie Manning's our chairman, but you turn it over to Ronnie Lott, you turn it over to Lynn Swan, you turn it over to Archie Griffin, great players in the history of the game, who say you've got to get a degree. We have got to put our foot in the sand and say you've got to get a degree. Transfer all you want, take all the money you want, you will get a degree, because we think that that's the value of football. So we view that as probably the most challenging thing for us right now, Rick.
What is the leverage that you all have to accomplish that? It is always a platitude to say you ought to get a degree, and only 0.1% of these players ever go pro, and all of that. You hear it everywhere. But how do you actually get this done?
Our attitude has been that we need to create a new carrot, I guess you might say. And the whole idea, which the Football Foundation will announce in early April, and we've talked to athletic directors, and again, we've talked to commissioners, and it's very simple. You go to college, you get a degree, or about to get a degree. We want you then to go to the NFF Leadership and Entrepreneurial Academy and GSV Boot Camp. And over a 4-week span of time, we're going to have people who are on our board provide insight. You do it Zoom, so we can do it through all 772 colleges and universities in the country. And when you complete the boot camp and you get into new aspects of many internships, that companies are now coming to us saying, we want to talk to those football players. We want to talk to the guys that got a degree and played college football. That we think by providing a carrot, especially for so many that see the value of a degree, because that group is out there, that we think that creating that new carrot, Rick, will make a difference.
And the NFF's brand and ability to sustain that brand will also get some attention as well, and the relationship, I assume, with all of these friends and partners in this group will bring you to the finish line also.
You bet. And again, we're not just coming at this out of the clear blue. Every year we'd have the Hampshire Honor Society, where every football playing institution in the country gets to nominate their players to be part of the Hampshire Honor Society. So you have to have a 3.2 grade point average upon graduation and graduate. And the numbers keep going up. The numbers this year that the folks in our office have put together, these would be the most and the highest number of participants we have in the Hampshire Honor Society as ever before. And then you couple that with our scholar athlete programs. And we have people that tell us all the time, what you guys ought to do is just read off the resumes of all of the football players that we honor every year, not just the 15 or 16 we give scholarships to. Read them off on all of them, because every year our scholar-athlete class has a GPA of 3.7. This past year, 9 were first-team All-America players, 10 were academic All-Americans. They were all captains. And we want to spin off of that and say, this game has great value. We just need to emphasize the education aspect of it more.
Roman, you're a tremendous pioneer, not just the first Cameroonian-born NFL player, but obviously so much more. And also what you currently do at the NFL relative to player development and all aspects of outreach strategy and game development as well. So uniquely qualified to answer the question from your perspective of what you think is the greatest challenge facing college football today and in the future.
Well, from my perspective, I have the reality of trying to understand the plight of the athletic administrator, the coach, the conference commissioner. I've been in NFL awards probably the last 7 or 8 years, going back to the Waldorf days in Manhattan. But so I see these kids every year, 3.7 GPAs, the All-Americans that are good in the classroom. I think from an NFL perspective, when I look at our general managers and team presidents, and obviously there's a lot of turnover every couple of years in those positions, GMs rather, coaches, they want to get it right. They want to know what type of kid is entering our locker room every year. The kid that's got $500,000 in the bank, there's the kid that may have signed his marketing rights away. And so now you're dealing with a different dynamic, and then you've got to learn the playbook. There's the tax problem. I used the example last year. I'm sure, a Caleb Williams or someone like that, a top half of the first round, they'll be able to absorb whatever tax issues they walk into a locker room. But what about that quarterback that went to 3 different schools, and he's not as good as those top guys, and now he's a 7th rounder, and he's walking to a locker room with a tax problem, and you've got to study your playbook and figure out if you're good enough. So I do love where NIL has gone. It's given the student athlete financial freedom. It's given the student athlete the opportunity to go outside of your boundaries, because with whatever $10,000, $20,000 you can, and probably a lot more than that, but you can afford a plane ticket. You can afford to see your parents come and watch you play. So those things are good. I just was in Indianapolis for the Combine. Only 54 juniors came out this year. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that number has been in the 90s up to 130s. So there was a point where there were a lot of juniors coming out that didn't get drafted. And so now they already dropped out of school after the holidays. They've still got that last 15 or 12 credits. So staying on campus a year longer, that's a year more of social adjustment. That's a year, obviously, getting some of the luxuries that you want. And hopefully, and as Steve said this, it's still about the student-athlete experience, and it's still about making sure that you get the value of a degree. I think from a pro personnel standpoint, I see a lot of GMs saying, you're now seeing the 3-school guy in football. That used to be a basketball model. Yeah. Okay, why did you transfer? I'm seeing, developmental issues. If a kid starts out at a smaller school and does well, and then he jackpots out of there, or if a kid that doesn't play as much and transfers down, and so now you're getting like the grad transfers and the kids that are transferring, mid-year or halfway through their career. So, but I do worry about the degree. I do worry about the fact that you don't have the perspective of a 30-year-old until you turn 30. And sometimes you see kids making these decisions at 17, 18, without the parent support. I'm glad that, my wife and I are educated. My wife's an attorney, and so we were going on visits with our kids. We're asking the right questions. We didn't care about what you were building, what stadium you were going to, enhancement you were going to make, and things that schools promise, which is fine, and they should have those goals. But asking the right questions about the culture, telling our kids that this guy that recruits you is probably going to leave at some point. This head coach may not be here in a year or 2 years, or definitely by the time you graduate. So understanding the coping mechanisms that the kids have to have when change does happen. And so those are things that again, I just want parents to be as educated as possible throughout the process, and not just about how much is my kid going to get. Olympic sports have benefited a lot. You talk about your head count sports have benefited NIL as well. But there's a few things that we worry about. But it's a reality, and we want to do as much research as possible so we don't have to react. And so research before you react. But I do appreciate these last 3 years of just the learnings over the last couple of years and how that's accelerated But I remember I used to be on some national news networks, and when the Northwestern thing happened, and what was my perspective? Should student athletes get paid? I think I used to have a perspective of what about the cost of tuition, and if you're getting more than that, and this was before I started working in this business. But I do empathize for a lot of the decisions that have to be made. Seeing head coaches leave, going to the NFL because they don't want to have to recruit and keep kids in. So there's a lot of things that do ultimately impact the NFL. But again, for the student athlete, the parents, the families, we just want people to be as educated as possible because it is about the benefit of a degree and the experience of the student athlete at the institution or the multiple institutions that they'll go to.
I was about to say that news media's approach to things like NIL and the Northwestern vote is an overhyped approach to punditry that doesn't get you anywhere. But I'm glad I'm not going to say that. I was just kind of thinking about that. One of the things that you have in common with our brother Hatchell is you mention education at the forefront, whether it's education about how to approach the business or education about coming back and you got to graduate because that's going to open up opportunities, and here are some opportunities as well. So, but I guess the frustrating part of it is your sons and your family, you're amazingly rare in having the opportunity to sit at a table and educate from your perspective. Most kids, male, female, whatever, get nowhere near that kind of education. So waving a magic wand, the most important thing I'm hearing is education of how this industry is evolving and how to stay one step ahead of it.
It's hard for me to learn the new advance, and I'm in the business. So when I talk to a lot of parents and I say, please go on the journey, and I say this all the time, go on the journey with your kid, go on the journey with the scholar athlete or the student athlete. Stop saying how much worse you had it 20, 30 years ago, or I wish I had an NIL deal, which is so, you have to deal with the reality of where things are now, but it starts with asking the right questions, being educated, and really seeing what the end of that journey will look like with change in coaches and with some of those things. So we have to just continue to all be better educated.
Bobby, obviously, in addition to being a hero in Montana, in every context of Montana, maybe except at Montana State, there is an understanding, and you're with the American Football Coaches Association, all of that. Your perspective of the challenges facing the industry, and it doesn't have to be from the coach's perspective, but maybe it ought to be from yours. So open book. Tell us what you think the biggest challenge is.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me up here. It's a real privilege to be with this panel. These guys are well, they have a lot of knowledge about what's going on around the country. And I think being a part of the AFCA and the Board of Trustees has given me some insight. I've had the advantage of being spending some time on some NCAA boards as well, and then working in my job. It gives me kind of a unique purview on how everything that goes on, because coaches really are pretty single-minded and maybe tunnel-visioned at times on all this. And I think that, I'm going to piggyback on a couple things that were said here. And Steve's mentioned that the education piece, we can't lose that. In college football, we have a really unique opportunity to just really push young men to get their college degrees, which is, I truly believe is their future. I came from an educator's household and a high school football coach, and learned that early on, and I think that we get to continue to convey that, so we can't lose that. And the other thing we do is we can't lose the fact, because all the monetary gain is what has really been pushed to the forefront of everything, and it's important, as was mentioned. The NIL piece has spun off into a different universe than it was intended. It was more intended to be what Roman had said about, be able to have your parents get to games, afford a plane ticket, really afford the true cost of attending a school out of state or wherever. And now it's spun off into something else. And then that, in conjunction with unlimited transfer, is just, it's a whole different world. It evolves. It's changing so fast we can't keep up with it. We can't keep up with it from a governance standpoint, from a rules standpoint, from what's going on. And within that, we have to always keep in mind, and this is the football coach speaking now, is that we have a unique situation where we get to develop young men, and we can't forget that. We can provide them with with skills and a purview and a work ethic and a discipline that'll help them be successful in whatever they want to do. Because football will end for all of them sooner than most of them would like, and then they have to go and be successful. And I think that the football piece of that and what we do in our programs, if we've got a great culture, helps them develop and a chance to be successful.
So Jay, a lot of pressure. I mean, I'm not talking about you being the 10th AD at Georgia Tech. What have they done for me lately? I'm talking about hot seat at a time of unprecedented turbulence and the revenue. We mentioned the $200 million at these other schools, and you got to crank it up as well. What is your perspective on the greatest challenge you face?
Well, I think, I want to start maybe kind of where Kevin did with, there's never been a better time to be in college athletics. Really, there's incredible amount of change. There's an incredible amount of unprecedented speed of change, which is really the challenge. But at the end of the day, fan interest has never been higher. Yeah. It's never been a better time to be a student athlete, right? Whether you look at the value provided to student athletes from NIL, but also quality of coaching, the resources provided to those student athletes from nutrition, the educational support from tutoring and advising, even looking at the sports science. Georgia Tech, we've invested significantly in the advances in technology and sports science around the game. And so there are all these positives, and I think there are huge positives for the institutions within what college athletics exists. And so we are at a great time in college athletics. There are challenges. This speed of change, is inevitable and ongoing no matter the industry, right? And so for us, it's the fundamental shifts and how do we deal with those. And I think the biggest challenge for us is exactly what the rest of this panel has articulated, which is how do we maintain the value of that education as we continue to find more value for our student athletes. That's always been our quest, right, is to find new ways to support our kids. And how do we do that and not lose the incredible value of the educational experience? We're going to take 125 young men to Ireland this summer, right? Most of them have never been. They've never been across, overseas. They've never left the U.S., right? We're going to help arrange for most of them to get passports. They've never been. That opportunity only happens in our college athletics ecosystem. No other sports enterprise in the world does that. And so part of that is how do we maintain all of the good things we continue to do for our student athletes and provide them opportunity with flexibility of venue, flexibility of NIL and value. So I think maintaining that collegiate model while being flexible enough to make room for these evolving opportunities.
You mentioned NIL also in the context of this is a wonderful time to be in college athletics. I wonder if every other AD would totally agree with you, but you are, as positive. And stick around you'll hear the next panel. We're talking about sponsorships, and we're talking about newfangled facility design, and we're talking about newfangled media. And you wouldn't have had those kind of discussions 10 years ago either. So I hear you. As far as NIL is concerned, one specific area that's probably more relevant to ADs than others, you all have different ways to handle the evolution of NIL. Some like collectives, some like distributing money yourself, some like sitting back and waiting for the landscape. How do you personally think that whole thing is going to play out, and how do you protect yourself in the middle of that to control as much as you can control, but not, I don't want to say get in over your head, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's I think the NIL question is one that is going to continue to evolve. Where it ends up, where it evolves to. I think anybody with that crystal ball would be fortunate to know the answer, right? But I think the key to that is you've got to work within the system, and the NIL as it exists today is where we are. And so finding, and I've recently hired a football coach, finding a football staff and a coach that can lean into that environment until it changes, right? At the end of the day, there are parts of it that are incredibly good. There are parts of it that are challenging, but you can either stand back and watch, or you can lean into it and find ways to make the best out of it and to providing student athletes value, helping them to achieve that value. We've got a great collective at Georgia Tech, our Tech Way. That's populated by great volunteers and donors that continue to help support our student athletes. Finding those ways to maximize that's really key.
We're going to cherry pick some of those challenges because there are a lot of them. And let's go back to Kevin for a second. You know, everybody thinks that conference musical chairs comes in waves and that we're ending the last wave. But the research that I had come up with says that there were 126 Division I schools that changed conference alignment since the new millennium. That's a lot of schools. And so, and I know the NCAA done some things, done other things, changed leadership. What's the current perspective on governance, on, this is almost too broad, but the Power Five relative to everybody else? It'd be interesting to hear what your perspective is on the landscape of conferences.
There's a lot in that question there,
Yeah,
that's
I know.
for sure. But I'm reminded that I worked for the Southwest Conference in 1988 after SMU had their death penalty, and I went down there as a 26-year-old, and I think about those 2 years of visiting and realizing all the realignment that spun out and thinking about Frank Broyles and all the great folks. So it's always been a part of our landscape, right? And so, you know, just to remind the group, the NCAA, we do what our membership wants us to do. And this is one area where they said, we don't want you to tell us who we align ourselves with from a conference perspective. So from a fundamental level, like we do at the NCAA, only what the schools want us to do. And alignment with conferences is something they have said, that's our decision. As schools look at athletics as an institutional advancement tool to align themselves in a different way with peers that they believe enhance their academic quality, enhance their athletic quality, whatever it may be, that search for being better is a part of our conversation and part of the decisions that schools make. What I hope is that it's always done with due diligence where we have the student athlete in mind. What is the impact on the young people by this change that we're about to make? Our university, the board of trustees, the presidents and others are saying this is the right fit for us, that they've kept the impact on the student athletes in mind. That's from a national perspective is what's most important to me. But this issue about the NCAA being involved and seeing that, so it will continue. And again, as people think about athletics, institutional advancement, and aligning themselves with people who they believe advance their university, that will always be a part of our landscape.
So here is a broad NCAA governance question, and answer the pieces you feel like answering. My suspicion is, given your experience and your world, you'll answer all of it as best you can anyway. What is the what's your feeling as to how the NCAA is perceived today relative to what it should be doing and what it shouldn't be doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, there's no question we've been on our heels for a period of time here. And, you know, one could go back and say, is that 20 years, 10 years, 15 years? I don't know, but I can certainly point to the Supreme Court decision 3 years ago that said, you know, you've got to reevaluate your regulations because one national rule is antitrust, anti-competitive. And that set in motion state activities, that's produced the NIL environment, et cetera. And so you can begin to see these. And then the court cases that we've talked about now in employment. So, you know, we've evolved from a membership organization where our schools could make the decisions to a public trust. And Condoleezza Rice called it that in 2018. I think that's right. And by that, it means that people in Congress, our state legislatures, they will have a say in how college sports works. They believe it's of enough importance to the public that they're going to have a say and a seat at the table. So I have to remind, in my time in 30-some years here, we've evolved from just a membership organization to a broader connective partnership that we had got to embrace at this point in time. And I know that's very hard for traditionalists to say, wow, well, you know, we have to embrace Congress, we have to. Not only on the employment issue that I talked about, but an understanding that this reach of college sports is so big, so broad, has the attention of so many people that a lot of people want to have a say in how it works. And if they believe in any way that people are being exploited, if they believe young people aren't having opportunities to transfer when others can, if they start to believe that it's not fair, then you're going to have a lot of people enter in and tell us what to do. To your point, we haven't told a very good story. It's a great story. It's transformative, just what Jay talked about, just what Bobby does every day, right? We have not told that story well, and we are paying a price for that now. But I am very pleased that Charlie Baker is on board at the NCAA. Not only does he know the folks in Congress who need to help us, he has got a clear-eyed vision of where we need to go, and as the courage to work our way through this very tough set of issues that we have.
Education is most important. You got to prepare for life after football and protecting these athletes. How do you best deal with the
twin issues of NIL and transfer portal?
Well, there's no easy way to do it. If you were to take a snapshot or come in and look at the National Football Foundation and our board, so you start off with Archie Manning, and then when you get into this educational aspect, we've got Ronnie Lott, Pro and College Football Hall of Fame, but then went on, not only did he get his degree, but then he went on to be a fabulous businessman, made a real difference in Silicon Valley. And then we added Bill McRaven, Admiral Bill McRaven, who went on to be the chancellor of the University of Texas after he finished with the SEAL Team 6 and everything that went on there. Then you add other people on our board, such as Anthony Noto, who played football at West Point, heads up SoFi. We have NFL owners. And everybody that's in that room has a degree. Everybody that's in that room has a family, a community that talks about what it is to get a degree and where you're going to be in life. What are you going to do? And we have an obligation, just like Kevin said, we have an obligation to tell that story. And we've not done a good job of telling that story. One of the things that stimulates the Football Foundation is that at the end of the year when we have our black tie dinner, which has gone on now for 66 years, we have a chance to honor, in our case, 7 U.S. presidents, Condoleezza Rice, great people. We had a chance to go and find a fellow who had played at Brown. He was a second-team All-American, believe it or not, at Brown. Then he went on and got all kinds of medical degrees. He's the only doctor in a certain part of the Sudan. And to get him to come to our dinner so we could, honor him, we had to go to the Catholic Church. And for 2 years, they helped us move doctors in to take over his schedule so we could fly this guy back to the United States to talk about what it was to get a degree, medical degree, a football player, and what that meant. We have so many stories of what it means to look down the road, what it means, as Roman talked about. You don't know what's going to happen when you're 30 until you get to be 30. Now, we have an obligation to tell that story. And we have examples to do that, and they're all over this country. And another initiative that our guys are getting into right now is the I played story. Raise your hand, I played. If you were to go into our Chief Operating Officer's office, Matthew Sign's office, in our offices, he has a database of 6,000 guys who played college football, who are leaders in this country. And it's Mark Harmon, who you see on NCIS. He didn't just play at UCLA. His dad won the Heisman. We've got guys that are leaders in this country, principals of schools, doctors, presidents of universities. We had a Supreme Court justice who played football. This goes on and on. We have an obligation, just like Kevin said, to tell that story. And we just haven't done a good job of that. And having been a conference commissioner, having sat in those rooms, we didn't talk about that. And we've got an obligation to do that, and we have to do it right now. So we're going to do that full speed.
Yeah, you are, and you, again, have such a common set of interests as well. Just take your youth football development hat that you're so influential and instrumental in. So you've got 2.4 million kids under the age of 17 playing organized flag football in the U.S. The whole NFL strategy is brilliant because you still embrace USA Football, Pop Warner, and everybody else from the tackle perspective, but now the flag football, not just because it's international, not just because women, and not just because we're leading into the Olympics, et cetera, the net becomes so much larger. Is there more of a obligation now, a commitment to say the right thing, do the right thing, offer legitimate kind of career alternatives? Now that you've always wanted to increase the number of eligible people who are turned on by football and play football, but now you've actually got it. Are we ramping up with post-career, post-football initiatives as well?
Yeah, well, I'll start by saying that you talked about Matt Sign. Matt and I played college football around the same time, so that's when football was played between the A-gaps. And you only threw the ball when you had to.
Was Matt as good as he said he was? Matt
he was
said
better.
he was really good.
He was better.
All right, I wasn't sure.
And so we've seen a game that's more athletic. We've seen a game that the quarterback acumen in a middle schooler is a lot more mature than it was, I'm sure, 20 years ago. So the growth of flag kind of marries the congruency of where the game is going now. You've seen the changes in the Pro Bowl and some of those things, but I remember years ago when I started, fighting this negative health and safety discussion.
Yeah.
And when we built the play football strategy, it was, look, women that play football will become moms who let their kids play, and that was the strategy. And so you saw flag grow. You also saw, this culture we live in that marginalizes the recreational participant. So if you're not on some club or travel team by third grade, it's like your athletic journey doesn't count. So you're seeing, girls leaving some of these sports that are over-traveled and over-clubbed to play flag football. So the growth in flag is great. We definitely don't want to cannibalize tackle football. I mean, tackle football is still a bread and butter, and you're still seeing universities start college football teams, whether it's NAIA, Division III, Division II. But you're also seeing the growth of the women in the business. And so not just marketing and PR, but you're seeing football ops, director of football operations, a former good friend of mine, Jericho Koch, who's a receiver in the NFL, just took a D2 head job. He asked for a referral that he saw across his table. Is my intern from last summer, who was a football ops student volunteer at Oregon, and now she's going to go be a head football ops person. So you're seeing a lot of different roles. You're seeing this game become a lot more inclusive, but it does start with participating in the game and being able to self-identify what your football journey is. And if it's tackle, that's great. If it's flag, that's great. We look at them as two of the same sport, but obviously different rules, different complexities. But again, you're more likely to be engaged with the sport to some degree if you played in some way. So all the things on the back end, you talk about leadership, toughness, accountability. I'm still, I'm 50 years old. I'm still scared of my high school coach. And so that's what football did for me.
He's more scared of you. I guarantee you, sight unseen, he's more scared of you.
But I do love and appreciate the inclusive nature that football has gone, not only from the flag participation, but in college athletics and administration on the business side, and you're seeing a different world. We just celebrated 100th anniversary of football a few years ago. When you talk about what the next 100 years looks like, it's flag participation, it's flag becoming an NCAA sport at one point, it's being sanctioned at the high school level as a girls' varsity sport, probably 11 states by the end of this year, and it'll soon be 50 states, I'm sure, at some point. So the future does look bright for how we define football participation now.
All of the things that you care about, where are we in 5 years on that?
Well, I think I would say that just from the athlete side, I mean, you have an athlete today that has a deeper sense of understanding of his brand or her brand identity. I'm from the era where you just put on a jersey and do an autograph signing and sit behind the table and the fans come by, and now the athlete has a choice to make. That affects his marketability or her marketability across all sports. And so, but there's a responsibility that comes with that too. And I think I preach that a lot with athletes. So I want the Gen Z or athlete or whatever that age or whatever that generation. My kids are in that generation. So just understand the deeper sense of responsibility that comes with being an athlete. Social media has brought kids together from around the country. A kid from South Florida or Montana is really the same kid now. It's not as different as they were 20 years ago or so. And so just from a coach and administrator standpoint, just continue to be transparent and continue to strive, because I think everyone wants the same goal. It's going to look different in 5 years, and I'm looking forward to just being one of the people that tries to mend the fences and bring people together so that the sport can grow and the game can grow. Jay, you talked about how it's a great opportunity to be an AD or to be in college athletics. I want that to be a better opportunity by the time we get to 2028 or 2027. And so I'm looking forward to seeing, really what the future holds.
And it will be great because you're involved in it, to be honest about it. I mean that with all sincerity. Bobby, in addition to winning, a whole handful of national titles at Montana, which you are, clearly very well equipped to do, and at the AFCA, where is the business 5 years from now, from your perspective?
Well, I think it's one of the reasons why we're sitting here is it's really hard to tell. I do know that, we've talked about defending the game and doing what's right for the players, whatever that means. We as coaches and even athletic directors, we work in our own bubble to a degree, and to keep up with this and steer it is really going to be a full-time job for people like Steve and his group, and they're a variety of people that really care about football. But I will say this, and it was mentioned, Teddy Roosevelt talking about banning football, all right, and they got rid of the flying wedge, and then we had that span of time where football was becoming unpopular a few years ago. But we've always fixed the game. We've always had bright people working on it. We've always fixed the game. It'll continue to evolve, but football's the American game. People love it. People love playing it. People love watching it. People love being associated with it. And I think that the game, as was mentioned, in the upcoming years will keep evolving, but we'll be healthy.
We need that on a poster, man. I'm ready to buy that too, obviously. Jay, your word, last word, kind of, as the resident optimist, you began this by saying this is the time, the best place you could possibly be. You going to say the same thing 5 years from now?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I think at the end of the day, I think student athletes are going to derive more value. They're going to be in an even better position going forward. And so I think college athletics will evolve. It'll look different. There'll be different areas that change. There'll be a lot of, I think, innovation, as you mentioned, Bobby, that the sport continues to change, and it is a great game. And I think across the collegiate athletic landscape, we're going to see evolutions. But at the end of the day, it's going to continue to be a part of the fabric that binds our institutions together, our communities together, and really the national sports landscape.
All right, I got something to say, and I think it's really important after you hear from these folks for the last hour. People talk about how troubled and turbulent college football really is. The Teddy Roosevelt, we're on the deathbed again. Here we are again, 115 years later, we're done. All the pundits talk about the challenges with the transfer portal and the challenges with NIL and the coaching carousel and musical chairs, and everybody can't take advantage of what they're doing. I'm thinking, again, as we said before, with all of the revenue opportunities and the best and the brightest and sponsorship stuff and facility design and media opportunities, but I think more important than anything is the collective spirit of the best and the brightest in the industry. You've got to understand how important it is to have the governing organization and the NFF and the NFL and the AFCA and athletic directors getting together, and what you hear are positive, concrete messages. Year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I'll say, when the NIL was being discussed, yeah, we'll talk about the details later. Those details didn't come, and everybody was talking about abrogation of responsibility. Now we're getting into how do we really fix this stuff? We've got some understanding of where the parameters are, so let's work together. And I know this is just a snapshot of tireless efforts of a lot of different people from a lot of different stakeholders that are represented at this table and here, but they're all working toward a common goal. College football is not going away. It's getting bigger and brighter. And I'm just happy to bring these people together in one small way to see if we can work this out. We're in for a wonderful time with the business of college football. Sports Professor Rick Horrow, speak with you soon.
Everybody excited about the newfangled playoff system, and obviously the stakeholders have a great say in the future of it. Let's talk about the opening drive, the top 5 issues the last couple of weeks, 1 through 5. Number 1, the playoff system. SMU rewarded Arizona State going from the Pac-2, maybe, into a high bye first round situation in the college football playoff. An incredible turnaround. Kenny Dillingham, absolutely coach of the decade. But SMU awarded some positives as well. They go from raising about $160 million as an entry point with the ACC, and super donor David Miller says he raised about $200 million for future commitments. The SMU team looking forward to the 11th seed and a game against Penn State. Bottom line is they get ahead of Alabama. They certainly get ahead of Miami. And the big discussion was, well, there ought to be at least 4 teams from the SEC. There are 3, and obviously the ACC has a deserving 2, at least one of the 2. That's number 1. Number 2, Juan Soto, 15 years, $765 million deal. Ohtani, 10 years, $700 million. The big difference is this is the longest, this is the biggest, and unlike the Dodgers deal, which was financed on the back of a TV contract, albeit huge, this is a deal financed on the back of Cohen, the Mets brand deal. Want to take the guy away from the Yankees? one basically game away from a World Series championship, but at the end of the day, he's a Met now. So we'll have to see how it all shakes out. By the way, the bottom line of number 3 is also involved in athletics. It involves the WNBA. The Toronto team called the Tempo. 10,000 people participated in the name of the team contest. It is a big deal, of course, in Canada. The Caitlin Clark moment of economic bliss has reached north of the border. And the team in San Francisco, it's Peter Guber and Joe Lacob's team to play at Chase Center. That's next year. Sky is the limit for the WNBA and, as far as everybody's concerned, Canada. That's number 3. Number 4, the Rays and the A's. The Rays, a step up, a couple of steps back. Their financing may be in place. The bonds and $142 million for infrastructure and $287 million for bonding. See where that goes. But the big story this week goes to Vegas. The Vegas Stadium Authority approved the lease and the non-relocation and development paperwork that should make way for the construction of the $1.75 billion baseball stadium on the Strip. The documents are covering 30 years. Development agreement needs to be done with Clark County as well as the state of Nevada. But if they start and continue on pace, they'll be open ahead of the 2028 season. The public sector contributing about $380 million, and the ownership of the A's may ante up even more than their $100 million original commitment. So that's number 4. Number 5, the NBA returns to China with a Nets-Suns initiative next year, but they go to Macau, officially a special administrative region of China. Remember where Daryl Morey in 2019 with the Chinese protests sided with the protesters and the NBA pulled the plug. Tencent and other organizations said, we're not going to carry you. This may be a subtle way back in. The bottom line is Macau is not mainland China, but it is a step in the right direction. So those are the top 5 opening drive issues for this week. Next up, the 5 to watch for the next week or 2. Here's number 1. Well, we're ready for NIL legislation and standardization. House versus NCAA, the settlement that the district judge Witkin imposed or asked people to agree on, hadn't been accepted. They wanted it amended. And in the meantime, California, Nebraska, and Oregon have told universities in their states that House, which was granted preliminary approval by the federal court, is incompatible with their state laws, which lifted the restrictions on NIL money paid to athletic boosters and collectives. The issue will be, how do you reconcile the state laws in all of the states with the pending House settlement and giving athletic directors a sense of stability in the coming years? That's number 1. Number 2, look forward to vodka of all kinds in the tennis majors. Grey Goose, owned by multinational company Bacardi, has agreed to another increased deal of $1.6 million and more for the Australian Open. Remember, Honeydew says the major drink for all of us at the U.S. Open. The bottom line is U.S. Open and the majors attracting sponsorship in the tennis industry higher than ever before, especially with Emirates and other airline companies filling the bill on that score. So that's number 2. Number 3, look for China and Formula One, a 5-year extension through 2030. And by the way, 150 million race fans, half following it in the last 5 years and half women. So obviously a big deal. 39% growth versus the season the year before for Formula One generally, and 4.4 million social viewers across all of Chinese social media. It is a big deal in China, and it's getting bigger. Number 4, look for the Robot Olympics 2026. The tech industry is stealing the opportunity after 130 years of the International Olympic Committee founding the Olympics. This will be a robotics competition with Asia, Middle East, and others, with WTG taking a major lead in it. We're not sure of the details yet. What we are sure of is it's going to be a major deal in the years ahead. And certainly, whether it's embraced by the Olympics themselves, this is going to be a major adjunct along with esports in the coming years. And finally, the Meta World Peace Raising Money Tour. Remember when he was Ron Artest? And in 2011, he was an athlete who changed his name from Ron Artest. And if you remember, he played in that Malice in the Palace game, probably the biggest on-court or in-arena brawl in the history of the NBA, when the Pacers played the Detroit Pistons. He doesn't want to be known for that. He wants to be known as a guy, along with CEO Steven Stokis, to raise $100 million for worthy incubators and small startups. And by the way, this is not the only star that's doing it. Michael Jordan's been doing it. Shaq's been doing it. The Greek Freak is doing it as well now. The fund will invest in at least 20 companies down the road and move them to the next direction. Well, good luck to him. That's our show for this week. We'd like to thank all of those participants who were involved in the summit at the Maxwell Awards. Certainly timely today. Thanking Callie Kazar for helping us put the show together. Thank you all for listening and watching as we get closer to the holidays and closer to the playoffs. Next week, we'll have another panel of ours to talk about college football in other contexts, as well as the opening drive, as well as the 5 to watch. Sports Professor Rick Horrow, inside the $1.3 trillion business of sports. You're on the record. Talk to you soon.